The morning sun cast long shadows across Heathrow Airport as Queen Camilla stepped out of the black Bentley. Her usual confident smile seemed strained as she adjusted her pearl necklace nervously. The royal security team surrounded her, creating a protective barrier as they moved toward the private terminal. What should have been a routine departure for a royal visit to France had already taken an unexpected turn. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell watched from a distance, her trained eyes noting every detail. She had received an anonymous tip just hours earlier, a call that made her blood run cold. The voice on the other end claimed that someone close to the royal family was involved in smuggling rare artifacts out of Britain. The caller mentioned specific flight details and a burgundy leather suitcase that would contain evidence of the crime. Camilla's personal assistant, Marcus Wellington, wheeled the burgundy suitcase behind them. He had worked for the royal household for 15 years and had never questioned any requests from his employers. Today, however, something felt different. The suitcase was heavier than usual, and Camilla had been unusually specific about keeping it close at all times. As they approached the security checkpoint, Royal Guard Captain James Harrison stepped forward. He had served the royal family faithfully for over 2 decades, but his loyalty to the crown meant following protocols regardless of who was involved. The anonymous tip had reached him through official channels and he couldn't ignore it. "Your Majesty," Captain Harrison said with a respectful bow, "I apologize for the inconvenience, but we need to conduct a routine security check of all luggage today." Camilla's face paled slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Captain. Though I must say this is highly unusual. My luggage has already been screened by our security team. I understand, Your Majesty, but new protocols require additional verification for international travel." Harrison's voice remained steady, though his heart raced. He had never had to challenge a member of the royal family directly. Marcus stepped forward protectively. "Captain, surely this can be expedited. The Queen Consort has a tight schedule to maintain." Detective Inspector Mitchell approached the group, showing her credentials. "I'm afraid this is not just a routine check. We've received credible information about potential smuggling activities involving this flight." The color drained completely from Camilla's face. She gripped her handbag tighter, her knuckles turning white. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I demand to speak with the commissioner immediately." "Ma'am, we can certainly arrange that, but the inspection must proceed first," Mitchell replied firmly. She had built her career on treating everyone equally under the law, regardless of their title or position. Captain Harrison gestured toward a private screening room. "If we could step this way, Your Majesty, we'll handle this with the utmost discretion." As they moved toward the screening area, Camilla whispered urgently to Marcus, "Call the palace immediately. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding." Marcus fumbled with his phone, his hands shaking. He had always suspected that some of the Queen Consort's private activities might not be entirely above board, but he had chosen to remain willfully ignorant. Now faced with potential criminal investigation, his loyalty was being tested in ways he had never imagined. The screening room was sterile and intimidating, with bright fluorescent lights and metal tables. Detective Inspector Mitchell put on latex gloves while Captain Harrison documented everything with official photographs. The burgundy suitcase sat on the table like a silent witness to whatever secrets it contained. "Your Majesty, do you have the key to this suitcase?" Mitchell asked politely but firmly. Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her handbag. "This is a violation of royal protocol. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the highest authorities." "You have every right to do so, ma'am. But right now we need to examine the contents of this luggage." The key turned with a soft click that seemed to echo through the small room. Everyone held their breath as Mitchell slowly lifted the lid of the suitcase. What they saw inside would change everything they thought they knew about the royal family. Nestled among expensive clothing and personal items were several small wooden boxes, each carefully wrapped in silk cloth. Mitchell lifted one of the boxes and opened it to reveal an ancient Egyptian scarab beetle made of pure gold, encrusted with precious stones. The artifact was clearly thousands of years old and absolutely priceless. "My God," Captain Harrison whispered, forgetting protocol for a moment. Camilla's face went from pale to ashen. "I can explain everything. Those items were gifts from foreign dignitaries. It's perfectly legal for members of the royal family to receive such presents." Detective Inspector Mitchell examined the scarab more closely. "Ma'am, This particular piece matches the description of an artifact that was reported stolen from the British Museum 3 months ago. There's a very distinctive crack along the left wing that makes it easily identifiable. The room fell silent except for the humming of the fluorescent lights. Marcus dropped his phone, the clatter echoing off the walls. He had packed that suitcase himself, carefully placing each item exactly where Camilla had instructed. Now he realized he had been an unwitting accomplice in what appeared to be a major theft. "I want my lawyer present before any further questions," Camilla said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, Your Majesty, but I'm afraid you won't be able to continue with your travel plans today." Mitchell carefully returned the scarab to its box, treating it like the precious historical artifact it was. Captain Harrison struggled with conflicting emotions. His duty to protect the royal family clashed with his obligation to uphold the law. This moment would define not just his career, but his understanding of everything he had devoted his life to serving. As news of the incident began to spread through secure channels, palace officials scrambled to understand how one of their most prominent members had become involved in what appeared to be an international antiquities smuggling operation. The ramifications would extend far beyond this small screening room at Heathrow Airport. Detective Inspector Mitchell carefully documented each artifact as she removed them from the suitcase. Besides the golden scarab, there were 3 ancient Roman coins, a Byzantine religious medallion, and a small jade figurine that appeared to be from the Ming dynasty. Each piece was worth a fortune and represented thousands of years of human history. Camilla sat in a chair beside the examination table, her usual regal posture replaced by visible distress. She watched silently as her carefully planned scheme unraveled before her eyes. The weight of potential criminal charges pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Ma'am, we're going to need to contact the British Museum's security department," Mitchell said as she photographed each artifact. "They'll need to verify whether these other pieces are also stolen property." Marcus stood frozen in the corner, his mind racing through months of seemingly innocent requests. He remembered Camilla asking him to pick up packages from various private collectors and art dealers. She had always explained them as legitimate purchases or gifts, but now everything seemed suspicious. Captain Harrison received an urgent phone call that made his expression even more serious. After hanging up, he turned to the group with grave news. "The palace has been contacted. Her Majesty the King has been informed of the situation." Camilla's face crumpled at the mention of her husband. The thought of disappointing Charles and bringing scandal to the monarchy was almost more than she could bear. "Please understand, this was never meant to hurt anyone. The artifacts were being preserved, not destroyed." "Stealing from museums isn't preservation, Your Majesty," Mitchell replied firmly. "These pieces belong to the British people and to history itself." Dr. Eleanor Hartwell from the British Museum arrived within an hour of being contacted. As the museum's chief curator of ancient artifacts, she could identify stolen pieces immediately. Her expertise would be crucial in determining the full scope of the crime. "This scarab was definitely taken from our Egyptian collection," Dr. Hartwell confirmed after examining it closely. "It disappeared during a routine inventory check 3 months ago. We initially thought it might have been misplaced during a renovation project." She moved to examine the Roman coins, her expression growing more concerned with each piece. "These coins are also from our collection. They were part of a special exhibition that ended 6 months ago. We assumed they had been returned to storage." The jade figurine proved to be the most shocking discovery. "This piece isn't from our museum," Dr. Hartwell said carefully, "but I recognize it from photographs. It was stolen from the Metropolitan Museum in New York last year. Interpol has been searching for it internationally." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. This wasn't just a local theft. It was part of an international smuggling operation. Detective Inspector Mitchell immediately contacted her superiors to request assistance from Scotland Yard's Art Crime Unit. Camilla's lawyer, Sir Geoffrey Pemberton, arrived shortly after Dr. Hartwell. He was one of London's most respected barristers and had represented the royal family in various legal matters for decades. However, nothing in his experience had prepared him for defending a royal family member against theft charges. "I need to speak with my client privately," Sir Geoffrey announced upon his arrival. "Of course," Captain Harrison replied. "We'll wait outside while you confer." In the privacy of the screening room, Sir Geoffrey spoke in hushed tones with Camilla. Through the glass window, Observers could see her shaking her head repeatedly and occasionally covering her face with her hands. The conversation appeared heated and emotional. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself being questioned by Detective Inspector Mitchell. His role as an unwitting accomplice made him a key witness in the investigation. "Tell me about the packages you collected for Her Majesty," Mitchell prompted gently. She could see that Marcus was genuinely distraught and likely innocent of intentional wrongdoing. "There were so many over the past year," Marcus admitted, his voice shaking. "She said they were gifts from collectors or purchases from legitimate dealers. I never questioned it because, well, she's the queen consort. I trusted her completely. Can you remember specific locations where you picked up these packages?" Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his calendar. There was a gallery in Mayfair, a private collector in Kensington, and several meetings at the Savoy Hotel. Her Majesty always met with the sellers personally while I waited outside. This information provided Detective Inspector Mitchell with potential leads to trace the smuggling network. It appeared that Camilla hadn't been working alone, but was part of a larger operation involving multiple dealers and collectors. Dr. Hartwell continued her examination of the artifacts, making detailed notes for her official report. "The sophistication of this operation is remarkable," she observed to Captain Harrison. "These pieces were carefully selected for their value and historical significance. Whoever planned this had extensive knowledge of museum collections and security procedures." After an hour of private consultation, Sir Geoffrey emerged from the screening room with a grim expression. "My client wishes to make a statement, but only after certain assurances regarding her treatment and the confidentiality of the proceedings." "I'm afraid confidentiality isn't possible in a criminal investigation," Mitchell replied. "However, we can discuss the possibility of cooperation in exchange for consideration during sentencing." The offer of a plea bargain hung in the air like a lifeline. Camilla understood that her best chance of avoiding a lengthy prison sentence was to provide information about the other people involved in the smuggling operation. Captain Harrison struggled with his divided loyalties as the situation escalated beyond anything he had imagined. His duty to protect the royal family conflicted with his obligation to support the criminal investigation. The scandal threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Word of the incident had reached the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister's office contacted the palace to discuss damage control strategies. The potential for international embarrassment was enormous, especially considering the involvement of artifacts stolen from American museums. As evening approached, it became clear that Camilla would not be traveling to France as planned. Instead, she would be spending the night in custody while the investigation continued. The burgundy suitcase that had contained her secrets now sat empty, its contents tagged as evidence in what promised to be one of the most sensational criminal cases in royal history. The first day of the investigation had revealed the tip of what appeared to be a massive iceberg. With international implications and royal involvement, the case would require careful handling to balance justice with the stability of the British monarchy. The following morning brought a storm of activity to Scotland Yard. Detective Chief Inspector Robert Hayes had been assigned to lead the investigation, bringing with him 30 years of experience in high-profile cases. His first task was to understand exactly how deep the conspiracy went and who else might be involved. Camilla spent her first night in a private holding facility, a courtesy extended due to her royal status. She had barely slept, tormented by thoughts of how her actions would affect the monarchy and her relationship with King Charles. The comfortable cell couldn't ease the weight of her guilt and fear. Marcus had been released on bail but remained under investigation. He sat in his small London flat, surrounded by newspapers whose headlines screamed about the royal scandal. His phone rang constantly with reporters seeking interviews, but he had been instructed by police not to speak to anyone about the case. Detective Inspector Mitchell arrived early at Scotland Yard to review the evidence collected from the airport. The artifacts had been secured in the police evidence vault, but photographs and detailed descriptions filled several folders on her desk. Each piece told a story of theft and deception that went back months, possibly years. Dr. Hartwell had worked through the night to trace the origins of each artifact. Her research revealed a disturbing pattern. "These pieces weren't randomly stolen," she explained to the investigation team during their morning briefing. "They were specifically targeted items that represented the highest value and historical significance from each collection." Chief Inspector Hayes studied the timeline that Mitchell had prepared. So we're looking at theft spanning over 18 months from multiple institutions. This suggests a sophisticated operation with inside knowledge of museum security and inventory systems. The investigation team had identified several key figures who needed to be questioned. The gallery owner in Mayfair, the private collector in Kensington, and the mysterious contacts at the Savoy Hotel all represented potential leads in unraveling the smuggling network. Sir Geoffrey Pemberton arrived at Scotland Yard prepared to negotiate on behalf of his client. He understood that Camilla's best chance of avoiding severe punishment was to provide full cooperation with the authorities. However, the royal family's reputation hung in the balance with every decision. My client is prepared to provide information about her contacts and the methods used to acquire these artifacts, Sir Geoffrey announced during his meeting with Chief Inspector Hayes. However, we need assurances about how this information will be used and disclosed. The Crown Prosecution Service will consider cooperation as a mitigating factor, Hayes replied, but we cannot guarantee immunity from prosecution. The severity of the charges will depend on the extent of her involvement and the value of the information she provides. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, King Charles faced the most difficult crisis of his reign. His private secretary had briefed him on the initial findings, and the king understood that decisive action would be necessary to protect the monarchy's reputation. The possibility of his wife facing criminal charges created a constitutional crisis unlike any in recent history. The king's legal advisors worked frantically to understand the implications of prosecuting a member of the royal family. Ancient laws and modern justice systems clashed as they tried to navigate uncharted legal territory. The principle that no one is above the law would be tested in the most public way possible. Detective Inspector Mitchell and a team of officers raided the Mayfair gallery that Marcus had identified. The owner, Sebastian Blackwood, was a well-known figure in London's art world with a reputation for dealing in rare and unusual pieces. His gallery specialized in ancient artifacts and historical collectibles. Blackwood's surprise at the police raid seemed genuine, but Mitchell noticed his nervousness as they explained the reason for their visit. I deal only in legitimate artifacts with proper provenance documentation, he insisted, gesturing toward filing cabinets filled with paperwork. We're investigating the theft of museum pieces that may have passed through your gallery, Mitchell explained. We need to examine your records for any transactions involving Queen Camilla or her representatives. The color drained from Blackwood's face as he realized the gravity of the situation. I never knew the items were stolen, he stammered. The documentation appeared legitimate. And dealing with royal family members, well, one doesn't ask too many questions. A search of Blackwood's records revealed a pattern of transactions over the past year. Camilla had purchased several expensive pieces through intermediaries, always paying in cash and requesting minimal paperwork. The gallery owner had been suspicious but had chosen to ignore his concerns, due to the prestigious nature of his client. The private collector in Kensington proved to be an elderly woman, named Lady Margaret Thornfield. She had been selling pieces from her late husband's collection to support her lifestyle after his death. The investigation revealed that she had unknowingly sold several stolen items that had somehow made their way into her husband's collection decades earlier. Lord Thornfield was a passionate collector, Lady Margaret explained to the officers who interviewed her. He acquired pieces from all over the world throughout his lifetime. I never questioned the legitimacy of his collection. This discovery added another layer of complexity to the case. Some of the artifacts had been stolen years or even decades ago, making it difficult to trace their path from museums to private collections and eventually to Camilla's possession. The international implications became clearer as Detective Inspector Mitchell coordinated with law enforcement agencies in other countries. The jade figurine stolen from the Metropolitan Museum in New York was just one of several pieces that had crossed international borders illegally. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Rodriguez arrived in London to assist with the investigation. Her expertise in international art crimes would be crucial in understanding the full scope of the smuggling operation. We've been tracking a network of dealers who specialize in stolen museum pieces, Agent Rodriguez explained during her briefing with the British investigators. Your case might be connected to a larger operation that we've been investigating for several years. As the investigation expanded, it became clear that Camilla's involvement was more extensive than initially suspected. She hadn't been a casual buyer of stolen goods, but appeared to be a key figure in an international smuggling network that moved priceless artifacts between countries and private collections. The pressure on the royal family intensified as more details emerged. Palace officials worked to control the narrative while preparing for the possibility that Queen Camilla might face serious criminal charges. The constitutional crisis deepened as lawyers debated whether a member of the royal family could be prosecuted. Like any other citizen, Chief Inspector Hayes understood that his investigation was about more than stolen artifacts. It was about proving that the rule of law applied equally to everyone, regardless of their position or title. The case would test the very foundations of British justice and democracy. The investigation took a dramatic turn when FBI Special Agent Rodriguez shared intelligence about a mysterious figure known only as the curator. This individual had been orchestrating high-end art thefts across multiple countries, targeting specific pieces based on private collector requests. The curator operates like a criminal matchmaker, Agent Rodriguez explained to the British investigation team. They identify pieces that wealthy collectors want, then arrange for their theft and delivery. The operation is so sophisticated that many victims don't even realize their items are stolen until years later. Detective Inspector Mitchell studied the intelligence files that Rodriguez had brought from America. The pattern of thefts matched exactly with the artifacts found in Camilla's suitcase. Each piece had been stolen to fulfill a specific request, suggesting that Camilla wasn't just buying stolen goods randomly, but was actively commissioning thefts. Chief Inspector Hayes called for an urgent interview with Camilla. Her lawyer, Sir Geoffrey Pemberton, advised her that cooperation was now essential to avoid the most serious charges. The evidence against her was mounting, and her best option was to provide information about the curator and the network of thieves and dealers. In the interview room at Scotland Yard, Camilla appeared smaller and more fragile than her public image suggested. The stress of the investigation had taken a visible toll, and she seemed ready to tell the truth about her involvement in the smuggling operation. It started innocently enough, Camilla began, her voice barely above a whisper. I met a man at a charity auction who claimed he could help me acquire rare pieces for my private collection. He was charming and knowledgeable about art history. Can you describe this man? Detective Inspector Mitchell asked. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, spoke with a slight European accent. He called himself Alexandre Dubois, though I suspect that wasn't his real name. He knew everything about my interests. In ancient civilizations and historical artifacts, the description matched intelligence reports about a man suspected of being the curator. Alexandre Dubois was believed to be a French national with connections to criminal organizations across Europe and America. He had never been arrested, but his name appeared in multiple international investigations. How did your business relationship with Mr. Dubois develop? Chief Inspector Hayes inquired. Camilla shifted uncomfortably in her chair. At first, he offered to find pieces that were already available on the legitimate market. But as my collection grew, I expressed interest in more unique items. That's when he suggested he could acquire pieces that weren't normally available for purchase. Did you know these pieces were stolen from museums? I suspected something wasn't right, Camilla admitted, tears forming in her eyes. But Alexandre assured me that the items were being rescued from poor storage conditions or corrupt officials in various countries. He made it sound like a preservation effort rather than theft. This revelation painted Camilla as someone who had been manipulated by a master criminal, but it didn't absolve her of responsibility for knowingly participating in illegal activities. The investigators understood that wealthy collectors often convinced themselves that their actions were justified when acquiring coveted pieces. Agent Rodriguez shared additional intelligence that shocked everyone in the room. We believe Alexandre Dubois has been operating for over a decade and has stolen artifacts worth more than $50 million. Your case, Your Majesty, represents one of his largest single operations. The scope of Camilla's involvement became clearer as she provided details about her transactions with Dubois. Over 18 months, she had paid nearly £2 million for various artifacts, money that had funded a sophisticated international theft operation. He promised me pieces that no other private collector could obtain, Camilla explained. The temptation was overwhelming. I've always been passionate about ancient history, and these artifacts represented the pinnacle of human achievement. Detective Inspector Mitchell pressed for more specific information. "We need locations, dates, and details about how the transactions were conducted. This information is crucial for tracking down Dubois and his network." Camilla provided a detailed account of her meetings with Dubois. They had met at various luxury hotels across London, Paris, and Monaco. He always insisted on cash payments and never provided receipts or documentation. The artifacts were delivered by intermediaries like Marcus, who had no knowledge of their criminal origins. The investigation team worked through the night to verify Camilla's information and coordinate with international law enforcement agencies. Dubois had left a trail across multiple countries, but he was always careful to avoid direct evidence linking him to specific thefts. Meanwhile, the constitutional crisis at Buckingham Palace deepened. King Charles faced the unprecedented situation of his wife being formally charged with serious criminal offenses. Constitutional lawyers debated whether royal privilege protected Camilla from prosecution or if she would be treated like any other citizen. The palace released a carefully worded statement, acknowledging the investigation while expressing confidence in the British justice system. However, behind closed doors, officials worked frantically to minimize damage to the monarchy's reputation and explore options for damage. Public opinion was divided between those who believed royal family members should be held to the same legal standards as everyone else, and those who argued that prosecuting the Queen Consort would damage Britain's international reputation and constitutional stability. The investigation revealed that several other wealthy British collectors had been clients of Alexandre Dubois. These individuals had unknowingly purchased stolen artifacts and now faced the possibility of having their collections seized as evidence. The case was expanding beyond royal involvement to encompass a significant portion of London's high-end art market. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell from the British Museum worked with international colleagues to identify all the stolen pieces that had passed through Dubois' network. The list included artifacts from museums in France, Germany, Italy, Greece, and Egypt. The international scope of the thefts required coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies and diplomatic channels. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Camilla's case was just one part of a much larger criminal enterprise. However, her royal status made her the most high-profile defendant and the focus of intense media attention worldwide. Chief Inspector Hayes understood that solving this case would require international cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The challenge was not just to prosecute Camilla for her crimes, but to dismantle an entire network of art thieves and corrupt dealers who had been operating with impunity for years. The fourth day of the investigation ended with Camilla being formally charged with conspiracy to receive stolen goods, money laundering, and violating international treaties regarding cultural artifacts. Her bail was set at an unprecedented £5 million, reflecting both the seriousness of the charges and her unique status as a member of the royal family. The international manhunt for Alexandre Dubois intensified as law enforcement agencies across Europe coordinated their efforts. Interpol issued a red notice, and the FBI placed him on their most wanted list for international art crimes. However, Dubois seemed to have vanished completely, leaving no trace of his current whereabouts. Detective Inspector Mitchell received a breakthrough when analyzing financial records from Camilla's bank accounts. The pattern of large cash withdrawals corresponded exactly with her meetings with Dubois, but more importantly, the investigation team discovered that some payments had been made through offshore accounts that could be traced. These wire transfers went through a bank in Monaco, Agent Rodriguez explained as she studied the financial documents. "If we can get cooperation from Monaco's banking authorities, we might be able to track Dubois' financial network." The diplomatic complexities of the case required involvement from the Foreign Office. British officials worked with their counterparts in Monaco, France, and other countries to secure the necessary legal permissions for investigating international financial transactions related to the art theft network. Meanwhile, Camilla struggled with the reality of her situation as she remained under house arrest at a private residence outside London. The constant media attention and the weight of criminal charges had taken a severe toll on her physical and mental health. King Charles visited daily, torn between his love for his wife and his duty to protect the monarchy. the king's private secretary received a message that would change everything about the case. A representative of Alexandre Dubois had contacted the palace through intermediaries, offering to negotiate the return of all stolen artifacts in exchange for Camilla's freedom and a guarantee of safe passage out of Britain. This is essentially blackmail. Sir Geoffrey Pemberton advised the king during an emergency meeting. Dubois is trying to use Her Majesty as leverage to escape justice for his crimes. King Charles faced an impossible choice. Accepting Dubois' offer would secure his wife's freedom, but would mean allowing a major international criminal to escape justice. Rejecting it would leave Camilla facing potentially decades in prison and would expose the monarchy to continued scandal. Chief Inspector Hayes was adamant that no deals should be made with criminals. If we negotiate with Dubois, we're essentially admitting that wealthy and powerful people can buy their way out of the justice system, he argued during his meeting with government officials. The pressure from international partners was enormous. The Metropolitan Museum in New York, the Louvre in Paris, and other institutions that had lost artifacts demanded justice and the return of their stolen property. They threatened to pursue their own legal actions if the British government appeared to be protecting royal interests over international. Law agent Rodriguez uncovered crucial intelligence when one of Dubois' former associates was arrested in Switzerland. Under interrogation, the man revealed that Dubois operated from a luxury yacht that moved constantly between different jurisdictions. To avoid law enforcement, the yacht is called Artemis, and it's currently somewhere in the Mediterranean, the informant revealed. Dubois uses it as his mobile headquarters, storing stolen artifacts and conducting business with clients from international waters. This information led to a coordinated naval operation involving British, French, and Italian authorities. The search for the yacht became a high-stakes chase across the Mediterranean, as various Coast Guard services tried to locate and intercept the vessel. While the international hunt continued, the investigation in Britain revealed more disturbing details about the scope of the art theft network. Several prominent British citizens had unknowingly purchased stolen artifacts through Dubois' operation, including a famous actor, 2 members of Parliament, and a well-known businessman. The revelation that multiple public figures had been involved, even unknowingly, created a political scandal that reached the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister faced questions in Parliament about whether the investigation had been compromised by attempts to protect influential people. Dr. Hartwell's research into the stolen artifacts revealed their true historical significance. These pieces represent some of the most important cultural treasures of human civilization, she explained to the investigating team. The Egyptian scarab dates back over 3,000 years, and the jade figurine is one of only 12 known examples from the Ming dynasty. The cultural value of the stolen items added another dimension to the case. Beyond their monetary worth, these artifacts represented irreplaceable links to human history that belonged to all humanity, not to private collectors regardless of their wealth or status. Camilla's psychological evaluation, ordered by the court, revealed a complex personality driven by perfectionism and a deep need for approval. The psychologist concluded that her involvement in the art theft network stemmed partly from a desire to create a legacy through her collection and partly from the thrill of acquiring forbidden treasures. Her Majesty exhibits characteristics common among wealthy collectors who become involved in illegal art markets, the psychologist reported. The combination of passion for historical artifacts and the excitement of exclusive ownership can override moral and legal considerations. The evaluation didn't excuse Camilla's actions but provided context for understanding how someone in her position could become involved in such serious crimes. It also raised questions about the culture of elite collecting and the temptations faced by wealthy individuals who have access to criminal networks. Marcus, Camilla's assistant, provided additional crucial information when he remembered details about the delivery methods used by Dubois' network. The stolen artifacts had been transported using diplomatic pouches and private courier services that avoided normal customs inspections. They always came through channels that seemed official, Marcus explained. I never suspected anything because the documentation looked legitimate, and the delivery method seemed consistent with how valuable items should be handled. This revelation led investigators to examine potential corruption within customs services and diplomatic channels. The sophistication of Dubois' operation suggested that he had contacts within various government agencies who facilitated the illegal transportation of stolen artifacts. As the investigation entered its second week, the pressure on all parties intensified. The media coverage had become international news, with commentators debating everything from royal privilege to the protection of cultural heritage. The case had evolved from a simple theft investigation into a complex examination of wealth, power, and justice in modern society. The search for the yacht Artemis continued across the Mediterranean, but Dubois remained one step ahead of law enforcement. His ability to evade capture while conducting complex criminal operations demonstrated the challenges faced by authorities when dealing with international criminal networks that operate beyond traditional jurisdictional boundaries. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source when a former crew member of the yacht Artemis contacted authorities through a lawyer in Monaco. Pierre Moreau had worked as a security officer on Dubois' yacht for 8 months before becoming suspicious about his employer's activities and quietly leaving the position. "I kept detailed logs of everything I observed," Moreau explained during his video conference with the international investigation team. Dubois was paranoid about security and required all crew members to document visitors, deliveries, and communications. Moreau's intelligence revealed that Dubois operated the yacht like a floating criminal headquarters. The vessel contained a sophisticated storage facility for stolen artifacts, complete with climate control and security systems that rivaled major museums. High-profile collectors from around the world would visit the yacht to view and purchase stolen treasures. "The yacht has hidden compartments throughout," Moreau continued. "Some are built into the walls, others are concealed beneath false floors. Dubois could hide millions of dollars worth of artifacts, and they would never be found in a routine inspection." This information proved crucial for planning the eventual capture of Dubois and the recovery of stolen artifacts. Agent Rodriguez worked with maritime security experts to develop strategies for searching the yacht if it could be located and intercepted. Meanwhile, the political pressure in Britain reached a critical point when Parliament demanded answers about how a member of the royal family had become involved in international art theft. The Prime Minister faced a confidence vote, and government officials worked frantically to demonstrate that no special treatment had been given to Camilla. The constitutional crisis deepened when legal experts disagreed about whether traditional royal immunity applied to criminal cases. Some argued that ancient laws protected members of the royal family from prosecution, while others insisted that modern democratic principles required equal treatment under the law. King Charles made the difficult decision to publicly support the criminal investigation and distance the monarchy from his wife's actions. In a carefully worded statement, he expressed disappointment in Camilla's choices while reaffirming the royal family's commitment to upholding the law. "The crown has always stood for justice and the rule of law," the king's statement read. "No individual, regardless of their position or relationship to the monarchy, is above the legal system that protects our society." This public statement effectively ended any possibility of royal intervention on Camilla's behalf and signaled to the international community that Britain was committed to pursuing justice, regardless of the political consequences. The investigation team received another crucial lead when customs officials in Monaco reported unusual activity at a private marina. Satellite surveillance had detected the yacht Artemis anchored in international waters near the Monaco coast, suggesting that Dubois was preparing for another transaction. A coordinated operation involving British, French, and Monegasque authorities was planned for the following morning. Naval vessels from all 3 countries would converge on the yacht's position to prevent Dubois from escaping while teams of investigators searched for stolen artifacts. Agent Rodriguez flew to Monaco to participate in the operation personally. Her expertise in international art crimes and her knowledge of Dubois' methods would be essential for conducting an effective search of the yacht and securing evidence that could be used in prosecutions across multiple countries. The night before the operation, Camilla received a final visit from King Charles. The conversation was private, but observers noted the king's somber expression as he left the residence where his wife was under house arrest. The weight of the situation had clearly taken a toll on both of them. "I never intended for things to go this far," Camilla reportedly told her husband. I thought I was preserving history, not destroying it. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on investigators. By removing artifacts from museums where they could be studied and appreciated by the public, Camilla had actually reduced access to historical treasures and potentially damaged their preservation through improper storage and handling. Dr. Hartwell had been working with international colleagues to prepare for the potential recovery of hundreds of stolen artifacts from the yacht. The logistics of properly cataloging, preserving, and returning items to their rightful institutions would be enormous, requiring coordination between museums and law enforcement agencies across multiple continents. Each artifact will need to be carefully examined and documented, Dr. Hartwell explained. We'll need to verify authenticity, assess any damage that occurred during theft and illegal storage, and coordinate with the original institutions for proper return procedures. The financial implications of the case continued to expand as investigators traced more of Dubois' transactions. The total value of artifacts stolen through his network was estimated to exceed $100 million, making it one of the largest art theft cases in history. Marcus provided additional information that helped investigators understand the full scope of Camilla's involvement. She had not only purchased stolen artifacts, but had also provided Dubois with information about specific pieces she wanted him to acquire. This made her an active participant in planning thefts, rather than just a passive buyer of stolen goods. She would show him photographs from museum catalogs and auction records, Marcus revealed. She even provided him with information about security, systems and exhibition schedules that she had learned during official royal visits to various museums. This revelation elevated the charges against Camilla from receiving stolen goods to conspiracy to commit theft and potentially espionage, depending on how she had obtained sensitive information about museum security procedures. The international media coverage reached fever pitch as the operation to capture Dubois approached. News outlets from around the world sent reporters to Monaco, and speculation about the outcome dominated headlines across Europe and America. Captain Harrison, who had initiated the investigation by stopping Camilla at the airport, reflected on how a routine security check had evolved into an international criminal case. His decision to follow protocol despite the target's royal status had set in motion events that would reshape how law enforcement agencies approached crimes involving powerful and influential individuals. As dawn approached, on the day of the operation, all parties understood that the next few hours would determine whether justice would be served or whether Alexandre Dubois would escape to continue his criminal activities from some other part of the world. The stakes couldn't have been higher for international law enforcement cooperation and the principle that no one is above the law. The operation began at dawn with naval vessels from 3 countries moving into position around the yacht Artemis. Dubois had chosen his anchorage carefully, positioning the vessel in international waters where jurisdictional issues could complicate any law enforcement action. However, the coordinated international response had anticipated this strategy. Agent Rodriguez watched from the bridge of the lead French naval vessel as they approached the luxury yacht. Through binoculars, she could see crew members moving frantically around the deck, suggesting that Dubois was aware of the approaching authorities and was attempting to destroy evidence or prepare for escape. Target vessel. This is French Naval Command acting under International Law Enforcement Authority, the captain announced over radio. You are ordered to stop engines and prepare for boarding. The response from the yacht was immediate and desperate. Smoke began pouring from various parts of the vessel as Dubois' crew attempted to destroy documents and potentially some of the stolen artifacts. However, the yacht's engines also roared to life as Dubois made a final attempt to escape. The chase that followed lasted only 20 minutes. The yacht was fast but no match for military vessels, and Dubois was forced to stop when the naval ships surrounded him completely. The sight of armed personnel preparing to board his vessel finally convinced him that escape was impossible. Agent Rodriguez was among the first to board the yacht, her heart racing with anticipation of what they might find. The vessel was even more luxurious than intelligence reports had suggested, with multiple decks containing elegant living spaces, sophisticated communication equipment, and what appeared to be a floating art gallery. Dubois himself was a surprisingly ordinary-looking man in his 50s, impeccably dressed even in the moment of his capture. He showed no resistance as he was placed under arrest, maintaining the composed demeanor of someone who had always expected this day might come. "I assume you're here about the British matter," Dubois said calmly as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. "I trust we can discuss this situation reasonably." The search of the yacht revealed treasures beyond the investigators' wildest expectations. Hidden compartments contained hundreds of artifacts from museums and private collections around the world. Egyptian statues, Greek pottery, Roman coins, Asian sculptures, and medieval manuscripts filled climate-controlled storage areas throughout the vessel. Dr. Hartwell, who had flown to Monaco for the operation, was overwhelmed by the scope of the discoveries. "This is like finding a pirate's treasure cave," she whispered as she examined artifacts that had been missing for years or even decades. The recovery process took 3 full days, with teams of experts carefully cataloging and protecting each piece. Many artifacts required immediate conservation treatment after being improperly stored during their time on the yacht. The total value of recovered items exceeded $200 million. During his interrogation, Dubois revealed the sophisticated nature of his operation with surprising candor. He had operated the theft network for over 15 years, building relationships with corrupt museum employees, private collectors, and wealthy individuals who desired exclusive ownership of historical treasures. "I provided a service," Dubois explained without apparent remorse. "There are people willing to pay enormous sums for the privilege of owning pieces of history. I simply facilitated those transactions." His records revealed that Camilla had been one of his most valued clients, not just because of her wealth, but because of her access to information about museum collections and security procedures. Her royal status had also provided legitimacy to his operation, as other potential clients assumed that her involvement meant the business was respectable. The international legal proceedings that followed were complex and unprecedented. Dubois faced charges in multiple countries, and the process of determining where he would be prosecuted first became a diplomatic challenge. Eventually, it was decided that he would face trial in France, where many of his most serious crimes had been committed. Camilla's trial began 2 months after Dubois' capture. The proceedings were held in a specially secured courtroom to manage the intense media attention and security concerns. King Charles attended every day of the trial, sitting in the public gallery to show support for his wife, while also demonstrating respect for the legal process. The evidence against Camilla was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, and recovered artifacts painted a clear picture of her active participation in the international art theft network. Her lawyers argued for leniency based on her cooperation with authorities and her claims of being manipulated by Dubois. "My client was seduced by a master criminal who exploited her passion for history," Sir Geoffrey Pemberton argued in his closing statement. "While this does not excuse her actions, it explains how someone of her standing could become involved in such activities." The prosecution countered that Camilla's royal status and access to privileged information made her crimes more serious, not less. They argued that she had betrayed the public trust and used her position to facilitate international criminal activities. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a verdict of guilty on all major charges. Camilla was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 4 years. The sentence was considered relatively lenient given the scope of her crimes, reflecting the court's consideration of her cooperation and lack of prior criminal history. King Charles announced that Camilla would abdicate her royal titles and responsibilities immediately upon sentencing. The monarchy would continue, but without her involvement, allowing the institution to distance itself from the scandal and begin the process of rebuilding public trust. Marcus received a suspended sentence and community service for his unwitting role in the operation. He had cooperated fully with authorities and showed genuine remorse for his actions. The court recognized that he had been manipulated by both Camilla and Dubois and had no knowledge of the criminal nature of his activities. The recovered artifacts were returned to their rightful institutions over the following months. Museums around the world celebrated the return of their stolen treasures, and new security measures were implemented to prevent similar thefts in the future. Captain Harrison was commended for his role in initiating the investigation. His decision to follow security protocols regardless of the target's royal status had been vindicated by the eventual outcome. The case became a training example for law enforcement agencies worldwide about the importance of treating all individuals equally under the law. Detective Inspector Mitchell received promotion to chief inspector for her outstanding work on the case. The investigation had required unprecedented international cooperation and had successfully dismantled one of the world's most sophisticated art theft networks. The constitutional crisis that had threatened the British monarchy was resolved through King Charles's decisive actions to support the legal process. Public opinion polls showed that most British citizens approved of how the royal family had handled the situation, and the monarchy's reputation was ultimately strengthened by its commitment to justice over family loyalty. The case established important precedents for international cooperation in art crime investigations and demonstrated that even the most powerful individuals cannot escape justice when law enforcement agencies work together effectively. The principle that no one is above the law was upheld, protecting the foundations of democratic society and international legal cooperation. Years later, the story would be remembered as a defining moment when justice prevailed over privilege, and when the international community proved that cultural heritage belongs to all humanity, not to wealthy individuals who would steal it for private gain.